So what I want to do this morning is just introduce the sort of broad theme of the retreat, say a little bit about the program and a little bit about the groups and reviews within the context of that. And then we'll have time. The rest of the morning we'll have a little break, but we'll sit. I'll maybe a couple of shorter sits, which I'll lead into. Yes, I'm aware that quite a few. I tend to teach. I'm a one-trick pony. I run along a theme, which is the practice that I do myself and have been doing for 20 plus years. And I'm aware that some of you will be quite familiar with that, and some of you not. So I hope to sort of cover both bases, and partly I can do that because we forget things, don't we? The mind is very slippery, especially with quite sort of subtle concepts and subtle ways of remembering to look, remembering to notice what's happening within the mind and the body. So I find for myself, I am confident that because I find for myself when I go on retreat, there's that I had sort of slipped into the background somewhere. So slippery mind. So I want to talk about three things this morning, and they roughly correspond to, I'm going to give you an image to start with that I've come across recently and found it really helpful. So I've been exploring the world of trauma and trauma sensitive mindfulness, trauma sensitive meditation, and various ways of working with the mind. So this image actually comes from someone who straddles both. He's a neurophysiologist and a long-time practitioner, and his name is Rick Hanson. Wrote a book called Buddha's Brain. And he has this image of practice as being like a garden. And he says there are three things that we do in this garden. So one is that we just be in the garden. And one of the other things we do is we pull up roots, we pull up weeds in the garden. And the third thing that we do is we plant flowers. And the practice is made up of those three things. And I think for a long time, my practice, in a way, the planting flowers and the pulling up weeds happen within the context of just being in the garden. There's an awful lot of being in the garden as a primary practice, and within that, the weeds and the flowers. But I've wanted to become a little bit more conscious of the planting flowers part of it. What Rick Hanson talks about is resourcing the mind, so that when we sit or when we're watching the mind, if you like, we know that it's a mind that where that practice is going to be beneficial to. So I'll say a bit about, I'll talk about that, and that's my third thing I'll talk about, resourcing. I want to start with awareness or mindfulness. And I will use the two words quite sort of interchangeably. Yeah, so there'll be this sort of focus of mindfulness, awareness, and right view with resourcing as a third leg. So there's an image in the Pali Canon that some of you may have heard me mention of the Buddha talking about an elephant, and he likens the head of the elephant to wisdom, and the neck of the elephant to mindfulness or to awareness. So basically, mindfulness supports wisdom, and that's what the image is saying. That's the relationship between mindfulness, awareness supports, it's one of the conditions that really supports wisdom. But I like to think of it, I don't know if the Buddha would have, what he would have thought about this, but I like to think of not only the awareness supporting wisdom, but there is all this sort of interrelating going on between the two, in terms of the muscles, the blood vessels, the skin. There's a lot that acts quite, well, there's a strong relationship between the two. And certainly the quality of awareness that we have, that there's a particular sorts of qualities in our mindfulness, in our awareness, that are more akin to wisdom and are greater supports for wisdom. So one of the main qualities that is not in all practices that we talk about as mindfulness practices. The key element in this type of mindfulness practice is receptivity. So it's an awareness of what's already there, of what's happening. That so any cultivation that happens is quite subtle, and it happens because of conditions like receptivity that in a way allows qualities to be cultivated, rather than there being a strongly directed cultivation or encouragement. Whatever encouragement is, it's like behind the scenes a little bit. So that quality of awareness, as well as being receptive, is quite spacious and kindly quality of awareness. So I think there's a difference between perhaps our usual, you can say, well, I'm aware. Any moment you can tune into awareness, and that's true. We can be conscious of something, we can attend to something at any moment. And I think there's a difference between perhaps that and attending with what the Buddha called right mindfulness, samasati. So mindfulness as a factor of the Eightfold Path. And Analayo defines this within the Satipatthana Sutta, within the definition section, and he talks about these 4 qualities of being mindful, clearly knowing, diligent in the sense of the quality of energy or attention we give to something, and this quality of being free from desires and discontent. So a factor of contentment in the mind. So I'll touch on these qualities, but already within right mindfulness and any of the sama qualities, they all they come from a degree of right view. They come from clear seeing. So within them there is already some wisdom there. So our field of investigation, if you like, is our own experience. So it's very much focused on the body, emotions, body, heart, mind, through the 6 senses. So not just the tactile sensations, but the faculties, if you like, of seeing, of hearing, as well as touching, and then the smelling and tasting, more sort of background senses, and the mind sense. There's the sense that's knowing what's happening, that's thinking about what's happening. That can also be known in awareness. So it's a practice not so much looking outwards to what's happening out there, but of staying a bit closer to home and recognizing what's happening within. So I think this can have quite a strong effect. If you like, our field of investigation has a strong effect on our field of influence. If we're able to really watch what's happening within, watch how we're relating to different experiences, that affects our actions, makes our actions sort of wiser and kinder and more effective. Might even extend our field of influence. Yeah, so in investigation, again, it can sound quite an active word, but it's actually still quite receptive. It's still about how, if we can settle back into receptive knowing, we can know things in a little bit of a different way, rather than sort of reaching out and looking. Often when we do that, we're attracted to what's already known. Whereas if we're able to settle back, then we can be a bit surprised. We can allow the mind to relax and let go of any particular sort of agenda. Receptivity sort of is willing not to know. It's willing to be surprised. So I'll be saying in different ways quite a bit about mindfulness and the qualities of awareness. And during the week, I'll be saying quite a bit about right view. So in two main ways. So primarily how to bring a right view or a Dharma perspective into watching the mind. So whether that's into formal practice or whether that's outside of formal practice, but I'm going to be encouraging you to be aware in as many moments as you can. So how to bring that right view perspective or Dharma perspective. There's many ways. I mean, right view, you can use that term very broadly. And at the end of the Satipatthana Sutta, in the fourth section, you've got a list of things that can stand, if you like, for Dharma perspective or right views. So the skandhas, you can look through the lens of the skandhas at experience. You can look at the mind through the lens of the hindrances or the Four Noble Truths. So all of those we can talk about those as different sort of facets of right view. I'm going to use it in a quite particular way, which goes back to the very early Buddhist text when right view which is still used a lot now, right view is quite synonymous with paticca samuppada. So it's really the perspective of experience, different momentary causes and conditions coming into being. And the traditional perspective is also linked with karma. So there's a sense of recognizing in your experience, in the moment, is this something that leads to suffering, or is this something that leads to freedom? So that's one way. Just very much in relation to practice. Looking at right view, but I also want to look at the big views, if you like, the views connected with things like dukkha, with craving and aversion and delusion, and views about the nature of self. So it can be quite helpful just to look at, get really clear about the views that we're holding in the mind, and often while we have individual expressions of those views, the views in themselves are often quite universal. So we're always coming from a view, our point of view. In conditions and conditioning sort of manifest in different ways through our own sort of unique conditions. Yeah, and so there's always something to identify, actually. Sometimes it's quite subtle, it's quite sort of close, almost like a second skin. But when we're really relaxed in the quality of awareness, then it's possible to identify some things that not only are they views, but they're views that we're quite identified with. So yeah, in case that sounds a little bit sobering and you don't feel that keen to focus on views around dukkha or craving or aversion, yeah, I get that. But I for myself, I find it very liberating. The experience of recognizing a view as a view, rather than something that I'm really caught in its slipstream. I'm identified with it, and then it's really painful. It's really painful to think I'm full of aversion, or I'm a crap meditator, whatever it is, whatever the view is, or I'm a great meditator. You know, it's yeah, when it's bound up with identification with that sort of sense of being all about me, or something I'm trying that I don't want to be about me. So there's this desire to sort of separate. We're still caught in the same identifying with. So yeah, painful to identify with something, but it's also painful to resist it. This shouldn't be happening. It shouldn't be like this. Yeah, being caught in doubt or judgment, or going through the cycle of sort of yeah, I'm great, I'm rubbish sort of cycle. And we have many different ways that we do this. Yeah. So I'm sure that you recognize that experience of sometimes being identified with something. And then perhaps there's a moment where the mind or the heart sort of releases from that. And maybe you don't know why. Maybe you don't know why it's happened, but all of a sudden there's a different perspective, and there's a bit more freedom and a bit more relaxation in the mind. So we're going to explore that area. Anyway, how for it not to be accidental that happens, but for it to happen through, if you like, strengthening the qualities of awareness and wisdom in the mind. And getting a sense of, in that moment, what that feels like, that feeling of wisdom to whatever degree. And again, I'm using the term, it's you know, in terms of the 3 levels of wisdom. I'm not necessarily talking about number 3. We can have those aha moments on many different levels and in different sort of strengths. But you can feel a quality of seeing or of knowing, and in those wisdom moments, and recognize it's a bit different to the usual way of yeah, of knowing. And we can feel out that freedom in the heart, in the mind. So yeah, we'll be looking to strengthen that muscle, if you like, of non-identification. And we do this by watching the mind. And as I said, the mind standing for all of the 6 senses, whatever's happening through the experience of body and mind. Watching or being able to see that interrelating between body, heart, and mind. Yeah, so I was saying last night, one of the real things that appealed to me in this type of practice was the working with direct experience, tuning into direct experience, and becoming clearer about that relationship between direct experience and concepts or ideas about what's happening. Just really simple examples, like, you know, rather than the simple experience of hearing, we are more likely to, if you like, go to the end of the process, which is, dog barking, for example, or car along the street. So there's an image in the mind, there's a some sort of idea about the sound that's being heard. And that's natural. It's natural that that happens, but it usually happens, the concepts usually happen at the expense of the direct experience. So in this practice, we look to redress the balance, be a bit more with the direct experience. So rather than all our attention, for example, going to something like an experience of pain, physical pain or emotional pain, there's a sense of what is that like in this moment in experience. Physical pain, so there's some tightness, maybe there's heat, maybe there's pressure, there's mental sense of unpleasant. But if we can be with that from a more sort of spacious, curious awareness, that changes a lot. It doesn't necessarily change everything, but it changes a lot, doesn't it? From being sort of tied up with the experience, bound with it in some way. So one of the ways of describing this is just this little sentence: how is the mind relating to experience? How is the mind relating to the experience that it's having in the moment? And can you recognize, is that in a more personal way? Can you in this way get to sort of see that bound upness or that identification with what's happening, with the pain, with a sense of what it says about me? Or is there, if you like, a wiser involvement where there's a less subjective, less personal relationship with what's happening? You can see objects happening, see them arising in experience, persisting for a little while, and then passing. And the thing with right view is whichever one we are seeing is there's some degree of right view in the mind. If what we're noticing is a more personal relating to the experience, the fact that we can see that means that there's some degree of right view in the mind. But usually we don't see it. Usually we're just so bound up that we don't notice that strongly personal way of relating to experience. So we'll be saying more about these, but I'm just wanting to give you a broad sort of overview for now. So I want to say a little bit about the third thing, which is resourcing the mind. So I think it's another support to not identifying, and another condition for mindfulness and wisdom to be able to work well in the mind. It's like if there's a relatively happy mind, a mind with some degree of contentment, that's if the quality of awareness has those things in it, it really supports, I think, the work that we do in meditation. It might be it might mean that we're able to stay with some really difficult things, because there's a part of the mind that's able to keep some sort of perspective of kindness, of openness, of curiosity, of not fully identifying with what's happening. So I'm definitely not saying that we are just cultivating a mind with a lot of pleasure, with a lot of ease. That those things are important, but if you like, they're important to support awareness. And awareness is just recognizing whatever is happening. Subhuti talks about the fit mind, which I quite like, fit for purpose, which is yeah, I think it is quite useful. It's like, well, is it going to be? Is the quality of the awareness? Is the quality of the mind going to help our practice? Is it what's needed to support practice? Is the mind resourced enough? Is there enough sort of resilience or spaciousness or positivity? Is the body or the body and mind relaxed to some degree? Because relaxation supports awareness. Certain amount of pleasure and well-being support an open heart and mind. So I'll introduce some short practices that you can use if you like to, for those times when you think, oh, actually the mind just needs resourcing a bit more. It just needs a little bit of some injection of focus on relaxation or positivity to be able to be aware in a more effective way. So some of these practices, you'll I mean, there's lots of things that probably you do already. We have the Metta Bhavana practice, we have the Brahma Vihara practices. So we can have things like walking, just going for a walk, being in nature, somewhere beautiful, things that resource us. And we can also, those are perhaps more external things. We look to external conditions to help resource the mind a little bit. But there are also internal things that we can do. And both have their place. And I'm going to be introducing more of these sort of internal resource practices. I keep having an image in my mind of a little story that I heard from, there's an American Dharma teacher called Carol Wilson, who I've been on retreat with a number of times, and met her in a couple of my trips in Burma. And I remember her giving a talk, and her talking about the quality of her mind. And she was on retreat, it's quite a long retreat at the Insight Meditation Society place in Massachusetts. And it's very beautiful there, especially in the fall. You've got those fantastic sort of trees, the colour of the trees, you've got these reds and oranges and yellows. It's very beautiful. And it's a real resource. And I remember her saying for about 3 weeks, she didn't really go outside. She was so, in a way, her practice was resourcing her to such a degree that she didn't sort of need to go outside. And she said every now and again she would go to the fire escape. She'd go to the door of the fire escape on the first floor and sort of stand on the top for a few minutes, and then she'd go back inside. She'd go walking and then sitting, and then a period of walking meditation, in the very sort of continuous way that they do there. And I remember telling this story years and years ago on retreat, and one of the women spoke to me afterwards, and she was absolutely horrified at this idea that God, there was all that beauty out there, and you wouldn't partake in it. Why wouldn't you partake? And she really didn't understand it. And but for me, it was quite inspiring, just because yes, it's out there and it's lovely, but actually, if the mind has that own, if it has that beauty within itself, you don't actually need it. Yeah. So why, in a way? So Análio, he doesn't use this phrase, but there's a phrase I talk about as cutting out the middleman. And so Análio, in The Meditator's Life of the Buddha, a lovely little book, he says happiness is mental after all. Searching for it via sense experiences is therefore a detour. Searching for happiness within by establishing a wholesome condition of the mind is more straightforward and more meaningful than trying to do so through sensual gratification. So yeah, I think it's quite a radical perspective in a way. It's like, but resourcing the mind. Sometimes we need external resources. We really do, and we need them, and they help establish a bit of positivity and balance in the mind to be a, particularly I think when there's a lot of unpleasantness in practice. If you're really going through something, or if you work with a lot of physical pain, it can be very wearing. And so take your resources where you find them. But to be able to just give your experience a little bit of attention in a particular sort of way, and feel the mood change, or feel, I'm more able to be with this. There's a bit more resilience in the mind, a bit more patience, there's a bit more acceptance. Those things, the feeling of being able to do that for ourselves, I think, is very, very valuable. Yeah. Ayakema, I think it is, says that we need to be able to do this for ourselves in order to relinquish the hold that we have on sense experiences. At some point, we need to have our own sort of inner experiences of joy and pleasure and satisfaction. And if we don't have those, then it's very, very difficult to let go of the clinging to sense objects. So it's not that we necessarily let go of sense objects, but that clinging to them, it's in direct opposition to what we're trying to do in the spiritual life. So one of these resourcing qualities is contentment, and I mentioned that in relation to this factor of right mindfulness that's free from desires and discontent in regard to the world of the senses. So it really has that quality of being able to be with whatever happens, regardless of how that is. With a degree of ease and a degree of contentment. I think one of the things that most strikes me about mindfulness and awareness, it is this idea that awareness, mindfulness, can be with whatever is happening. So where sometimes, particularly if I've got a lot of pain, I get a lot of migraine, so quite a lot of physical pain. And I might ask myself, how much is the mind joining in this moment? How much sort of buying into, okay, so there's physical experience, but what's the mind doing in relation to that? Is it complaining? Is it sort of sinking under the weight of its own resignation? Is there some sort of agitation or disturbance because I've got things to do, like coming up with all these reasons, and sometimes it is like that. So it's always it's not looking for the right answer, if you like, but there's an investigation of what is the mind doing in relation to what's happening. or is there a degree of contentment, a degree of independence from the conditions of the body in that moment. So I find that quite a fruitful question. How much is the mind, how much is awareness joining in when something difficult happens or something unpleasant happens? And not to judge myself if the mind is joining in quite a lot, because yes, it does. Of course it does. But asking that question actually brings more awareness, and it brings more right view, it brings more Dharma perspective into play. It's then less likely to just carry on getting involved in this, if you like, the mind being pulled into the scenario. So maybe just before I talk a bit about the programs, there's just one more thing to drop in. This is another of the right mindfulness qualities. So that's a tapi, or diligence. So that quality of right effort, right energy. So Bhante talks about a happy mind leading to a concentrated mind. And just to say, in this particular practice, we are not aiming for a strong degree of concentration. We're not aiming for a strong degree of focus or that unification of the mind, but to keep it open and broad. So you may be aware of lots and lots of different objects, moment to moment, but there can be a continuity of awareness of them. So if you like, you don't build the stability in the mind on one particular object, but you allow that stability, it's another way of talking about concentration, to build through more and more moments of awareness, like a necklace of different sort of pearls or something. And if you can string those moments together just through practice, then you have that same quality of happiness, I think, that same quality of contentment and satisfaction in the mind through continuity of awareness. So this quality of atapi, diligence, diligence is a particular it's a bit dry, isn't it, as a word? But I think in some ways it's quite useful. It's a bit akin to something like persistence or perseverance. So there's a sense of not needing very much energy, not needing to throw a lot of effort with awareness practice, but a little bit of effort, but really, really regularly. Like a heartbeat, just keeps coming, and if you can be aware of as many of those heartbeat moments as possible, and then you forget for a while, but it's there to come back to. Present moment, present moment. Yeah, so that happy mind, there's a similar quality of stability, and yeah, in this case with this practice, it's that happiness that really supports your willingness to be with whatever's arising, without getting pulled under by the difficult things, or pulled into the really pleasant things, or the things that we perhaps want more of. Okay, so the program, as I said last night, I'm going to be doing it a little bit differently to usual, in that I thought it would be nice to keep the mornings, apart from this one and maybe the last one, to keep them quite meditative, with a little bit of input. So the input will mainly come through some led meditations, and perhaps opportunities for you to just say a little bit about what you noticed in any particular practice. So it'll be a little bit hearing from you, a little bit hearing from me, but mainly we'll be practicing together in the mornings. And then in the afternoon, I thought I'd explore some of those big views. I thought I'd like to go into them in a little bit more depth. So some input, and we'll sit together. And if there's time, I'm hoping that there'll also be a bit of time for personal reflection within that period. So that's an hour and a half. That's from 4:30 until 6. And in the evenings, we'll have a simple ritual. Sometimes the ritual will take up more of that hour, and sometimes it'll frame the meditation within that period. And often that meditation, I think, that will largely be unled. So do take opportunities with the unled periods in particular, and your own practice in the mornings, if you do one, to do again to do what you feel would support and resource the mind. So that might be sadhana in the morning, or a more structured practice, because the practices that I'll be leading will, on the whole, be unstructured. There'll be very few bells or stages, so that it's much more in the area of open, formless, just sitting type practice. But as I say, I'll be putting practice instructions, threading them through some of those sessions. Yeah, and recordings will be available for the input sessions. So if for any reason you can't make one of the morning or afternoon sessions, then they're available online, and you can find them through the Padlet. Maybe we could have the Padlet link, Maitri Devi, if you have it, in the chat again, because a couple of people won't have that, or at some point today anyway. Yeah, so there was a question last night about the groups, or someone saying they wouldn't be able to come to the groups. So there are just 2 groups. The groups are today within the 4:30 to 6 o'clock session, and the last day, Friday, within the same session. So they're embedded within the program already. And the rest of the days, there'll be meditation reviews. So not every day. I think there'll be 2 reviews each over the 4 days in between, and they can happen at any time. So you have a chance this afternoon to talk with the person who's facilitating your group about when is a good time for you, if it's not at the time suggested. So hopefully that will work out hopefully there's enough flexibility in there that will work out. So you don't feel like you have to miss out on something that you'd like to do. Yeah, and well, we're at home, and I was really interested to hear last night, for a couple of people, it is their first online retreats. Yeah, so different conditions, and I know that some of you have work and family responsibilities during this time, or community responsibilities. So yeah, being at home gives us a lot of flexibility. And this practice, I think, is ideal in terms of bridging that space between retreat and home. Just as much as you can, taking awareness into different activities that you do, different interactions with people. So there are things that we'll all need to attend to. And at the same time, if you have got choices that you can make to keep things simple, I think that will really help sort of with habits around activities, perhaps particularly around reading. If you're a big reader, I'm quite a big reader. It might not be necessarily that you completely stop, but that you just guard the gates of your senses as to what you read. Guard the gates of the senses around tech, about what's necessary and what's actually not necessary. It's optional, and just consider wise choices in that way. But sometimes on retreat, certainly U Tejaniya in Burma, he would like to put us all to work, and he's a bit frustrated by the Burmese way of doing things, where basically yogis, the meditators are yogis, they are meant to not do anything except sit and walk. And actually, he sees it as quite helpful to the mind to have some things to do, some gardening or some cooking or whatever, things that you can take mindfulness into quite easily. So do experiment taking mindfulness into activity, through activity. Okay, that is plenty. So I'll leave it there. But if there are any questions or comments, then we've got time if you'd like to ask something or say something before maybe we have a little break before sitting. So that we will have opportunities, hopefully most days, to either ask questions or to offer something about your practice. Okay. So it's 25 past. To be comfortable. And perhaps as you start to settle, perhaps just keeping your eyes open, unless you have a strong preference for them to be closed. But just perhaps starting with your eyes open. So sometimes we can come to sitting practice without necessarily giving us the time to see where our mind is inclining, to see what the body and mind are ready to do. And it can be something of a relief to not try to do anything, even trying to do very receptive practice. But just think, well, here I am, I'm just sitting here. And where do the eyes want to go? Where is the attention wanting to go? And perhaps trusting that the body and mind know how to settle without us directing too much.
Perhaps there's a difference in the way that we think about settling, how the mind and body settle, how we do settling. And what happens when we allow a sense of naturalness for body and mind to know how to settle, how to eventually come into present moment. You might notice there's some degree of softening in the eyes. It can be very revealing. Perhaps seeing is happening rather than an active looking at things. Perhaps there's some natural sense of settling back, relaxing into how we're sitting. And we can naturally be curious about this process, just watching it as it happens. Watching where the attention goes. And allowing awareness to accompany attention, moving from place to place, from sound to sensation. And perhaps attention stays with one aspect of our experience for some time. With a particular sound, perhaps the sensations of the breath moving through the body. And perhaps with the experience of seeing, if your eyes are still open. So notice if you have a particular agenda about where you want the attention to go. And just notice that. noticing, being aware of it can free us from identifying with that action. Perhaps the attention goes to thinking. Awareness can notice that too without necessarily being caught up in the content of the thoughts. Attention is always going somewhere. And we can learn to let awareness accompany it. Awareness lends a sense of presence, curiosity, stability to attentions moving from one thing to another. The mind that settles back, relaxes into awareness, can sometimes have the quality of appreciation within it. Appreciating the awareness in the present moment. And you might notice how that feeling of appreciation, how it is to be aware of that, how it feels in the mind and the body. And every now and again, just reminding yourself to be aware in the present moment. Is awareness present? And feeling into that sense of presence. Relaxing into it. And if you find that the mind is getting caught in a lot of thinking or story making, then it can be helpful to give yourself some sort of anchor, choosing one aspect of experience, which might be the physical sensations of the whole of the body, or the breath, or some other part of the body, perhaps the hands, the buttocks. And like a ship's anchor at sea, it doesn't hold the attention in one place, but it allows it not to travel too far. Just keeping a light attention on your chosen anchor. if you're using an anchor, you can still notice the attention moving out to other things. And you might allow that to happen to some degree, allowing awareness to follow. And then just returning to the sensations of chosen anchor. Experience might be quite subtle, and that's fine. We don't have to try and intensify in any way. So we'll have another sit in a few minutes, but there's a bit of time now. If anyone, and I invite you to do this probably most days, anything, any moments of awareness that just caught your interest, just moments where you perhaps felt quite present, and it can be quite ordinary, just anything from the practice that interested you, that you'd like to share. Mokshadashini.
I think I got really interested there in where words come in, labels come in, and there was something about the mind, it wants to answer the question, what is it? And sort of slipping off more, staying with what the quality of the awareness is like. So if I sort of attend to sort of physical sensations in the body, I notice I can't so easily I put that into language, and it seems to sort of keep me in a more of a kind of not knowing. But I really felt it in that practice then of, yeah, just keeping to want to go to language, like there's some kind of inner subtitles wanting to be written all the time.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it felt a bit of a tussle between.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Yeah. Great.
New. New.
Great. Yeah, it's good to see, if you like, there's two modes, the direct experience and the more sort of conceptual labeling mode, and maybe just something that might help it not seem to that sort of tension or tussle, is that it is a natural, the conceptual mode, it's essential. We couldn't do without it, and it's a conceptual part. It's an essential part of how, if you like, how our minds are constructed. It's what perception does. It's the job of perception, if you like, amongst other things, is to label, to create these sort of shortcuts in the mind, so that we know that that's a knee and that's a bird, or whatever. So so it's not that we're trying to sort of shut that out, which isn't what I think you're saying, but just to, if we know that that is also a natural quality in the mind, it's a natural sort of faculty in the mind, then it can not make it an either or sort of thing. Yeah. Thank you. Anyone else? Vilasani. Oh, and then Suj. I'll get it in the end.
I think I've got it. Yes.
You have.
I'm trying to work with acceptance at the moment. I have dementia, and I'm very clearly aware that the mind and the brain are not the same thing. With me, my brain is very severely damaged, so there are times when I lose the ability to comprehend what I'm looking at or what I'm hearing. Last night was the new moon, and I went out to take a vow to the new moon, and I couldn't see it. I knew it was up there, and there weren't clouds. There were very, very few clouds, but I couldn't see it. Eventually, I decided, well, I'll take a vow to the moon that isn't. And then I thought, no, the moon is. I have to take a vow to the moon I cannot see. So I did that. And today, but it's hard for me to accept that I can't see it. It's there, but I can't see it. And today, yesterday, I took an hour and a half to look for something that was right where I thought it was. And it took an hour and a half for me to see it and find it. And today I'm trying to work with accepting that that is how it is. And it's hard.
Mm.
And I'm not really yet able to do that.
Yeah. No, hats off to you, Vilasani. I think the quality of your awareness that's able to discern all these things. The quality of awareness, the mind that's aware, and the brain that's deteriorating. Yeah. But I think what in this case, notice the non-acceptance. That's what you can be aware of. That's what you can. That's the quality that's present. So rather than trying to find something that's not there, just okay. Oh, can't accept. And there may be some acceptance of that non-acceptance. It's often easier to accept what's actually there than that's a bit closer to home than the moon, or not being able to see the moon. But actually what's there is a desire to accept something, and just recognizing that desire, recognizing that non-acceptance in the moment, it could be a relief.
Yes, thank you. That it is actually accepting the non-acceptance. It really is a relief. So thank you.
Suajini.
Hello, Vajradevia and everybody. Can you hear me okay? I'm on a little tablet thing. If it helps, I've kind of settled on Suchayani because I think that's a bit easier than that aspirated J sound, and certainly it is for me.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so if that helps people.
Yeah, Suchayani.
Thank you. So mine's really quite a subtle, small thing, really, but I was really delighted to notice my my stomach. I was like, I think it's partly because I'm off this week, so I'm just kind of sliding into relaxation. I don't think I ever properly relax. I know that's probably a view, but that's kind of where I'm at with it. And it was just really nice to hear my stomach doing its thing, and to have that sense of my stomach doing its thing. I think often I'm going from task to task and I'm quite tense. And it was reminiscent of when I first started to meditate in the really early days. You know, when people kind of stop, then you hear all these stomachs kind of gurgling. Yeah. So anyway, I was just really, quite delighted.
Great. Yeah.
To kind of have that experience.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you. Yeah. So there's the experience of the stomach, and then there's the experience of the delight in the mind, that quality of delight, which you clearly noticed as well. So thank you. Okay, so we've got about 20 minutes, so let's just have another short sit for about 15 minutes, and then I'll just say one thing about the groups for this afternoon. So I'll lead into it, and then just let us settle. So start off in the same way, just letting the body and mind come to settle. In many ways, I think the less we try and do, the more accessible the present moment is and the settling in the present moment. And the sense of trying and doing are often modes of being that happen underneath the radar of awareness. So as you settle back, you might become a bit more aware of the quality of energy or quality of effort. Yeah, that's working in the mind. Sometimes it can be looking quite hard for something to be aware of. Or it can be thinking quite hard. Perhaps even thinking about the practice, how to do it, whether we're doing it the right way. Or without getting caught up in the content, the concepts particularly. Seeing if it's possible to tune into the quality of energy, quality of effort being used. And you might want to just drop in the idea to reduce any unnecessary effort. How little energy or effort can you use and still be present? Not necessarily present or aware in every moment. We're not looking for perfection. Looking for some moments of awareness, some moments of mindfulness that will condition the arising of other moments of mindfulness. curiosity or interest can also be qualities of mind that help condition more moments of mindfulness. Interest in the present moment and whatever is arising within it. Whether that arising is through one of the physical senses or through the mind sense, either is fine. And we can be aware of any object arising within awareness. Sometimes we get a sense of the energy or effort being used when we focus on hearing, on sound. Sometimes there can be a reaching out towards a sound, along with the identification of that particular sound. So notice that reaching out from a more settled back place. Noticing the amount of energy and perhaps some tension in reaching out or following a sound, perhaps waiting for it to arise again. Just tuning into the mental energy. Noticing it from a more relaxed, open, spacious awareness. If the quality of energy feels a little sluggish or a little tired, that's reminding yourself of how little energy it takes to be aware, to simply accompany what's happening. Being aware of that feeling of tiredness, low energy. The quality of the mindfulness is not the same as the quality of the mood or the energy as object in the mind. It's a poem by Denise Levertov called Witness. Sometimes the mountain is hidden from me in veils of cloud. Sometimes I am hidden from the mountain in veils of inattention, apathy, fatigue. When I forget or refuse to go down to the shore or a few yards up the road on a clear day to reconfirm that witnessing presence. So that's all we've got time for this morning. So hopefully we'll all meet at 4:30, those of you that can make it. And we'll sit for about half an hour, and then we'll have an hour in groups. So the groups that you're in will be the team person in that group will be the one that you'll have your reviews with. And the groups this afternoon is really a chance just to share something of your own meditation, where you're at the moment, and perhaps a bit of the history of your meditation practice, or your Dharma practice more broadly, as it, particularly in relation to awareness, mindfulness, wisdom. So what, perhaps nuts and bolts, what do you enjoy? What do you do? Those sorts of things. But really, a lot about your relationship to practice. I think that's all I need to say. Maitri Devi, did you have anything to say?
Just unmute myself to say no, not really.
Okay. All right, we'll leave it there, and see you later this afternoon.